Did you know one of the main figures in the American Revolution, well, his opponents actually called him the Machiavelli of chaos.
Quite a label.
But then you have his cousin, John Adams, believing he was basically born to cut ties with Great Britain.
That's quite the contrast, isn't it?
Exactly. So today we're looking into Samuel Adams. And no, not the beer. We mean the revolutionary.
Right, the man himself.
We're using Stacy Schiff's biography, The Revolutionary Samuel Adams, to sort of unpack who this really complex guy was.
It's a great source. And actually thinking about how we unpack these ideas, it reminds me a bit of those analyses you find on the Mindful Moments YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, they take complex subjects like books and break them down, encouraging you to think critically. Similar to what we try to do here, exploring Adams's strategies and his whole story.
That's a good parallel. Okay, so where do we start with Adams? His background seems, surprising.
It really does. You wouldn't necessarily predict revolutionary leader from his early days. He was born into a pretty well-off family in Boston. Malting business.
Had a nice house, too, I read. Ocean view, even an observatory.
That's right. Quite comfortable beginnings. And he went to Harvard, focused on classical literature. You know, Ovid, Cicero, Virgil, Homer, the big names.
And debate, apparently. Even tackling the idea of resisting a ruler.
Yes, exactly. The question of whether it was lawful to resist the supreme magistrate if the Commonwealth couldn't otherwise be preserved. Quite prescient, wouldn't you say?
Definitely foreshadowing there.
Yeah.
But then, after Harvard, it seems he didn't really jump into a career like his classmates.
No, he didn't, which is why Schiff calls him the patron saint of late bloomers. It's kind of fascinating. No clear profession right away.
And didn't he actually end up quite poor later on, a real riches to rags situation?
He did. It's a significant shift. Suggests maybe material wealth wasn't his main driver, or certainly not later in life.
Gives you pause, considering where he started. What was Boston like then? Can you paint a picture?
Oh, absolutely. Think of a really stunning town, built on the water, lots of warehouses, shipyards, a major hub.
And the food sounds amazing. Pork, lobsters, oysters.
Apparently superb food, yes. And the whole place centered around the townhouse, which was quite stately, a really dynamic setting for everything that was about to unfold.
So, how did he first get into politics? Was it gradual?
Well, his father was involved in something called the land bank scheme. It didn't end well financially for the family.
Okay. So that might have influenced him, seeing potential injustice.
Very likely. It seems to have instilled in Samuel a real principled stance against what he saw as unfairness or overreach. And around that time, or perhaps connected to his Harvard thinking, he started writing anonymously.
Right, for the advertiser, defending liberties.
Exactly, defending rights and liberties. You can see the seeds of his later arguments there. He had this idea of a balanced government.
Balanced out.
Where, individual rights and the power of the government are sort of in equilibrium. Neither one should completely dominate the other.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And this ties into his views on taxes. That seems central.
Absolutely central. It evolved pretty quickly into outright resistance against any taxation without consent, without representation. He famously called it reducing free people to tributary slaves.
Strong words.
Very strong. For him, it wasn't just about money. It was fundamental, about freedom itself.
So the 1760s arrive, British policies like the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act. This is where he really steps up.
This is where he truly emerges as a key figure. He starts writing pieces for the Massachusetts House, though unsigned. He gets involved in protests.
Like hanging the effigy of Andrew Oliver, the stamp distributor.
Precisely. And he was instrumental in organizing the non-importation movement, getting people to boycott British goods. He was relentless.
People noticed, right. He was described as having indefatigable zeal and undaunted courage.
Yes, those descriptions pop up. And what seems really key was his ability to understand people, to read them almost.
He could see far into men, someone said.
That's the quote. It suggests a real knack for understanding motivations, for influencing people. And he seemed, almost immune to distractions, like petty arguments, boasting, even art, apparently. Just laser-focused on liberty and rights.
So, not just a passionate guy, but strategic, too, working behind the scenes.
Oh, very strategic. Schiff describes him beautifully. He bobs and weaves, vanishing around corners. He wasn't always the one giving the fiery speeches in public.
More of a planner, an organizer.
Exactly. A master of political maneuvering. And he understood the power of the press long before that was common.
Using newspapers and pamphlets.
Constantly. Shaping public opinion, often writing anonymously or using pseudonyms. You mentioned Vindex. There was also determinatus, populace, and others.
Which must have driven his opponents crazy. That Machiavelli of chaos line.
Oh, definitely. Governor Hutchinson, a major opponent, saw him as incredibly cunning, manipulative. Another Crown official basically said his methods were, beneath contempt, comparing them to oyster wench.
Wow. High praise from the opposition, in a way. Shows he was effective.
It certainly shows he was getting under their skin.
Yeah.
And his tactics worked. Look at the response to the Townsend Acts, the Boston Massacre.
He shaped the story there, didn't he? Pushed hard to get the troops removed.
He absolutely did. He helped frame the narrative, portraying the colonists as victims of military aggression. And then, critically, came the Committees of Correspondence.
Ah, the communication network. That seems ingenious.
It really was a way to share information, coordinate resistance, and build a sense of unity among the colonies, which were quite separate entities back then. It was foundational.
Thinking about influence, those committees were a masterstroke in organization. Makes you consider how leaders shape narratives, doesn't it?
It does. And reflecting on these kinds of strategies, Adams's ability to mobilize opinion. It's interesting to compare it to how information spreads today, or even how channels like Mindful Moments analyze influence in texts. It's all about shaping understanding.
That's a really interesting point. The tools change, but the goal of shaping discourse remains.
Precisely. And these committees laid the groundwork for what came next.
Independence.
Yeah.
So the resistance just keeps escalating. The tea tax.
He kept pushing back. The tea tax led directly to the Boston Tea Party, another major event Adams was deeply involved in organizing, though likely discreetly.
And the British knew he was a problem, right? Weren't they trying to arrest him?
Oh, yes. By the time of Lexington and Concord, he and John Hancock were specifically targeted by General Gage. They had to flee Boston.
But he didn't back down. What kept him going, do you think? Facing arrest? Maybe even execution for treason?
It seems to come back to those core principles, that deep-seated belief in colonial liberties. From his perspective, the real treason wasn't resisting the crown.
It was failing to defend their rights.
Exactly. Failing to defend the liberties they believed were inherently theirs. That was the betrayal in his eyes.
So when the Continental Congress meets, he's there, arguing for a complete break.
He was a delegate, yes, and a consistent voice pushing for independence. Long before it was the popular view, actually.
And his influence on the Declaration itself.
Schiff argues he'd been inculcating Republican ideals for years. He helped create the intellectual and political climate where the Declaration became possible, even necessary.
And his cousin John thought he was destined for this all along.
It's quite telling, isn't it? Whether it was hindsight or genuine foresight from John, it shows the powerful perception of Samuel's role, even among his contemporaries.
It's really something, tracing that path from the late bloomer at Harvard to this pivotal figure. What stands out most to you about his journey?
For me, I think it's that combination of unwavering idealism, that absolute focus on liberty, combined with incredibly shrewd, practical, sometimes even ruthless political tactics. He wasn't just a dreamer. He knew how to make things happen, how to organize, how to persuade, how to pressure.
Yeah, that blend is fascinating. He ends up being this really complex figure in history, praised as a genius by some.
And vilified as a dangerous agitator by others. Even today, historians debate his methods and motivations.
But you can't deny his impact, his commitment, his organizing skills. They were undeniably huge factors in the revolution.
No question about it.
So, thinking about it, this mix of high ideals and the very down-to-earth, sometimes controversial tactics, what lessons, if any, do you think we can draw from his approach for trying to create change today?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? It makes you reflect on the balance. How do you stay true to your principles while also being effective in the real world, which often requires compromise or, well, maybe playing hardball?
Something for all of you listening to think about. If this exploration of Samuel Adams got you thinking, please subscribe and maybe share it with someone else who enjoys digging into history.
And definitely check out the show notes for links, including the link to Stacy Schiff's biography if you want to read more.
Most importantly, keep engaging with history. Keep asking questions and keep thinking critically about how the past shapes our present.